everybody. This is Tom Escobar from New York No Limits, and this is the No Limits on Film podcast where we talk with some of our independent film creators. And today I'm very lucky to be joined by Cara Griffin, director of her short film My Savior, which is premiering at New York No Limits Art of the Short on July 27th, 2023. You can check out more about it or get tickets at newyorknolimits.com. Cara, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. Thanks so much for talking with me today.
Of course.
So, Cara, let's get into it. My Savior tells a story of while growing apart from her childhood best friend, an introverted teenage girl is forced to confront her obsession with a male pop star. So Cita Atwell wrote the film and also stars in it.
Yes.
And the film deals with, it's essentially about, obsession and fixation. And I think, coming into young adulthood and you're starting to question what you're doing and who your friends are and what's important to you and what's important to them. And the pop star is, I guess, kind of like a Justin Bieber type of character. But what drew you to the subject matter?
So I think that when Cita pitched the film to me, she had written a draft of it already. And she kind of originally was writing it as Justin Bieber is the pop star in the film. And we quickly were like, it can't be Justin Bieber because we can't do something about Justin Bieber for, copyright and all those kind of things. So we were like, how can we make a different type of pop star who is evoking a similar thing? And I kind of had my own obsession with pop stars in the form of One Direction was sort of what I was obsessed with as a tween. And Cita was obsessed with Justin Bieber, but I think we both found the similar vein between those two kind of just boy bands, boy pop stars in general when you're that age. Definitely like our age group had a huge moment with them. And I think it was exciting to think about that time of my life again, where you're kind of trying to block out the time of your life that's like ages 12 through 14. But I think it was exciting to tap back in and think about like, why were we so obsessed with these things, and like what kind of emotions did that evoke within us, or how did that help us grow up and like get closer with our other friends and learn things about ourselves, and also what parts of that obsession were kind of negative and made things in our lives kind of weird and uncomfortable. And I think it's a really cool way to look at that time of our lives, especially as young girls, and how like everything you're experiencing is sort of in comparison to the people around you and the things that you all like or enjoy or interested in. So I think it was really cool to be able to tackle that.
Yeah, very much so. And it's kind of funny in the film because it's almost as if like the song is there's a heightened quality about it, and obviously the way that you shot it. But it's kind of funny because the sound is actually in some way the song is good, like in that pop kind of way. But you definitely seem to be making a comment, I thought, about the way the song was made and kind of the way that you shot the scenes where she's imagining she's in the songs of the video. Can you talk about that for me?
So the song was made by one of our friends, and we kind of were bringing reference songs in, a lot of Justin Bieber songs that we were hoping to create a kind of dance-focused music video world where dancing is sort of the most significant part of the video while like different backgrounds are happening in the back. I feel that was kind of a big sort of style of that era where they're just in a studio and it's all about like the dancers and they can just do whatever they want in the background. And it's not about being on a beautiful location or something, which I think was a really funny style and time for music videos where there was a lot of like new creativity of using a lot of visual effects and things, but also kind of it being really actually very simple. And so, yeah, we wanted to kind of like, kind of an ode to that moment in time in the film, and also to kind of have the song be, we were hoping to make it very catchy, like kind of
Mhm.
people would want to know the words and kind of, have a chorus that is repeated a lot throughout the film, the way these songs are repeated in our lives a lot, like the same lyric is sort of being sung tons of times in the film. I don't even know how many times, but I think that repetition is, really authentic for how these songs would be stuck in the girls' heads, like they would want to learn the dance. They would want to be able, like the dream would be to be a backup dancer for the pop star, So to have that moment come in the film after the main character is kind of experiencing all these really normal feelings of isolation from friends and changes in her life, to then be able to go into like her exact fantasy and really live it out, I think was a really exciting turn for the film to take. Yeah, to kind of just think of like what would be the best thing, her most exciting thing to happen after all of this stressful things that are going on in her life.
Yeah, it's very well done. The song is great,
It's
actually,
so
and I think a
great.
lot
I
of
love
ways.
it.
Yeah, it's definitely catchy. Um, yeah, too. I think in the movie, obviously, it's relatable, really, for anyone, because all of us can remember when we were that age, and you started to grow apart from certain friends that you were very close to for different reasons, and I certainly remember that. I think I feel like for boys and males, it's kind of like at least I did. Like you sort of like internalize that. You don't really. You don't really think about it. You kind of just put it out of your head, and you move on, and you don't really. But it seemed like in the film, it was like she had that moment where she kind of realized, her friend is not who she thought she was, and she
Mhm.
becomes very angry. Can you talk about that? Is that something that you personally wanted to bring into the film, or can you talk about how you wanted to maneuver that into the story?
I think that Cita brought that with the script, definitely, about having a turning point where they were so close and now it's different, and it's really confusing because it's not clear exactly why that's happening. We kind of see it through, we kind of don't see the turn, which I think is also an interesting way to sort of show that we sort of see the best time of their lives when they're loving the pop star, they're dancing together, hanging out all the time. We sort of skip to when they are no longer friends. We don't see any fights. We don't see, moments of like ignoring each other in person. I think we just skip right to how that is shown on social media, or how that would affect Sita's character kind of in an internal way when she's by herself. And I think that is a sort of really true way to show that kind of thing, because I think with things like that, when I was young, when you have fights with friends, I don't, I'm not totally stuck on the exact moment when things were different, but I'm sort of more thinking about when you realize things are different, you kind of, you miss it. If you knew it was happening while it was happening, you maybe would be able to stop it. And I think it's actually really natural to, as you grow up, not totally understand why those kind of things are happening, and then to kind of have a moment of looking at that. And I think using social media and like her looking on Instagram to see, to in a really clear way, in the context of the film, to see that her friend has moved on, has a different kind of life than her. She's not in any of those photos. I think that's a really clear, I think it was a fun way to visually show in a really obvious way, sort of obviously something is different now, and we don't know exactly what happened, but that's not really what's most important. What's most important is that the main character feels really abandoned, and it doesn't mean that it's her ex-friend's fault. We don't, it's not necessarily that the ex-friend did anything wrong. It's just that things change and it affects especially young girls really differently. And I think it was fun to show it that way, of her just experiencing pictures of what the old friend is up to.
Yeah. I think that's an important point to the story, talking about how social media becomes a factor. kind of in these situations? I mean, when I was growing up and going through it, there was, none of this. There wasn't even really the internet, of course, at that point, for me, being my age that I am. But yeah, I mean, that's something, you're going through all these things as a person, and then you bring in this sort of like public element to it. I'm sure it can be very difficult and confusing, to an already sort of, difficult situation, a young person's trying to deal with. But let's talk about you a little bit. Tell me what are some of the films that influenced you?
I think definitely that whenever I'm creating visual references for films, I'm always pulling from a lot of Sofia Coppola films. I really like the way she captures girlhood in the broad sense of the term with visual language by really leaning into the colors that are very almost stereotypical girly, like pinks and purples and blues, and kind of really leaning into an overall mood where every shot is kind of reflecting the mood of the character that's in frame. And I think that's a really cool way to let a story sort of take itself along, especially if it's about young girls, and just kind of, yeah, I really just appreciate directors that really take their characters, especially young characters, seriously, and have them as characters sort of allow for the visual language of the film to really like stay close to them, and really show what they're feeling as the film progresses. That wasn't exactly your question. Sofia Coppola is one director who I really love. I really also I love a lot of Greta Gerwig's films. I also like the way she, is really attentive to girlhood and her characters and giving them, a lot of space to grow. Um, those are definitely my two favorites. Let me think if I have any more. Um, I really love the movie Mustang, which is about a group of sisters in Turkey, and the director is Denise Ergonzin, but I might be pronouncing that wrong, but I really, really love her style as well.
That's great. I don't know that one. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah,
Really
I think it's interesting too, because you're another film that you made, screened with us in 2020, In the Name of the Father, and there was very little dialogue in that film, from what I recall. And then in My Savior, it's kind of interesting because the first 2, 3 to maybe 4 minutes of the film, we hear the song that's in the film, but then there's not really any dialogue. So it does seem like, do you feel like you're kind of attracted to, films where you can just tell the story, where, again, you're just setting up, a lot of visuals, and you're telling the story that way rather than using dialogue to get where you're going?
Yeah, I think that it's really exciting to be able to tell a story without a lot of dialogue and to sort of challenge yourself to figure out how certain shots could communicate what maybe you would what you would, originally maybe think I should communicate this with this one line of dialogue. And I think it's really interesting and a cool challenge to think, okay, this actually isn't something that needs to be said. How can we convey this exact thing with images? It's a film, like we have the tools. That's the whole point, is to use the visual tools that you have. So I think it's really exciting to really think about what you're trying to communicate, and do you actually need people to say something? Obviously, sometimes you do, and sometimes really talky kind of films can be really, really fun. My favorite movies are very dialogue heavy. It's not that I'm always watching very slow, quiet films, but I think when I do watch those, I'm really excited by the way that doesn't actually make it any less interesting or exciting or engaging. It's not actually about the dialogue. And yeah, this film definitely had more dialogue than In the Name of the Father, which was a Czech film. So it was also kind of encouraged by our professors, because I did that through a program, to keep the dialogue to a minimum because the actors were speaking in Czech, and we wouldn't be able to sort of know as well if they were saying the lines as we wanted, because I don't speak Czech. I had a crew member on set who was helping with the dialogue, but I think that was a really cool way to enter into trying to have a style where there's not, the dialogue isn't the most important thing. I think shooting that film in Czech was a really cool learning experience of like, we don't want to have to deal with that, So let's, while in the pre-production process, let's figure out how to actually make it even better without dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. What are you working on now?
So the film I just finished shooting yesterday is about Eve from the Garden of Eden. And after she's been exiled from Eden, she now lives in a mystical place that we don't really know where it is. And she's forced to have a cooking show to support herself. And she can only cook apple-based desserts.
And is that a short film or a feature film?
A short film, yeah. And this one is very dialogue heavy. So this was a really fun, exactly opposite of what I was just saying. A really fun switch was to focus on really getting the dialogue how we wanted. And I think that was really fun to work on with my actor.
Oh, wow. That sounds very cool. I feel like we could go into talking about the Adam and Eve story for probably another hour or so, which might be kind of fun. But we're going to wrap this up. So that's Cara Griffin, director of My Savior, written by Cita Atwell, screening at New York No Limits on July 27th. You can learn more about it at NYNL.com. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.